My guest today is Jess Coleman, a lifelong New York City local like myself who's running for city council. We talk about what it means to build a strong community, how politics can rise above acrimony, and what motivates one to even get into politics. It's a pretty interesting conversation and a little inside baseball as well.
Well, I know, were you everything as long as you?
We were both hard. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you're one of those.
Wow.
I came to law school later after a couple of different career job things. And it was actually the first time I really enjoyed school. I
Yeah.
loved law school.
Yeah.
I loved the friends I met. I loved the study.
I loved law
My
school,
plan
too.
was never partner corporate. That was never, so I didn't have that pressure.
Yeah.
I just
no.
studied and
I didn't really know about the whole big law partner track situation
Right.
even when I went to law school. It was just always a plan of mine because, that's just what I was always doing was interested in public policy and law altogether. So it was just a natural fit.
Right.
But after that, I really had no idea.
Yeah, no idea.
I had no idea.
Yeah. Did you enjoy it though? You enjoyed the process?
I did enjoy law
Yeah.
school. I did. I know that's a sick thing to say. And
No,
also,
I loved it.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting. And again, because I didn't have that pressure, I was just sort of open. I just
Yeah.
enjoyed, which is probably what school should be, just soaking it in.
I know. I
And
wish
then
it was.
figure it out.
I was in law school from 2016 to 2019. So it was also the first Trump administration where it was
Yeah.
every day there was a new constitutional crisis in real life that we would then be learning that issue that day.
Oh, interesting.
It was we were learning the
Interesting.
removal power the day that James Comey was fired. It was just
Wow.
nuts. It's just,
we both had significant events. On my first year in law school was 9/11.
oh, wow.
Yeah. And so right here at New York Law.
Yeah.
So we're very much in the community that it happened
Yeah.
to.
Did you go straight through from college to law school or?
No, what happened? I finished school. I had a marketing company, and then my partner moved back to Brazil, and then I had a company that actually out of this space, our office, which was that many businesses, another cafe, another studio. That was when laptops and public school programs were just starting up.
Mm.
And so I actually became a Toshiba certified technician, and my friend and I were sort of the sales tech end of that program. And so we were working in sort of public schools,
Yeah.
helping with these programs.
Wow.
One thing or another help with that. And then after that, I was like, you know what? If I go for higher education, law school, I think is what I would enjoy.
It's a good one. Yeah. And you could do anything with it.
And you could do anything with it.
Do anything.
So I
Be a
went,
podcaster.
It could be a podcast. I mean, what's great is I went to BMCC, I went to New York Law School, I went to Baruch. So
Wow.
my
Yeah, you made a little circle there.
yeah,
And
then
a lot of
also
Tribeca.
done
I like
a
that.
lot of Tribeca. But so were you. So born in Battery Park.
Mhm.
You now live officially in Tribeca, but
Yeah.
the point is you're born and raised
Way uptown. Yeah, way uptown. in
way
Tribeca.
uptown. But what's interesting is because one of the things that I was thinking about you and things I'm curious about is, to go into politics,
Mm.
and I get the sense we're similar in some ways. I'm sure we'll discover that. I think you have to have some sense of vision about yourself forming pretty early. You have to have, I think, particular influences.
Yeah.
And I know your parents
Yep.
were very active.
Yep.
So just tell me a little about background, them, sort of those
Yeah.
formative years.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because growing up in Battery Park City, you get a very unique upbringing, at least the time that I was born, because my parents moved there, I think sometime in the 80s. I mean, it was literally like a beach. And
Right.
this is Lower Manhattan where it's as built up as it could be. But here we were in this neighborhood that really started out as nothing. So we had the unique experience of living in Lower Manhattan, but getting to build our community really
Yeah.
from scratch. And so my parents, my mom was one of the first co-presidents of the Parents Association over at PS 89. My dad was, integral in helping build up the Little League and the ball fields we have on
Right.
West Street.
And your mom she started a walk for books or a book run?
The Run for Knowledge.
The Run for Knowledge.
Which
Yeah,
is still
great
going
name,
on.
by the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah,
That's
no,
amazing.
I give her credit for that one. And she had a background in digital design, so that
it.
kind of made nice, cool T-shirts.
What was their professions?
My dad's a lawyer.
Yeah, okay.
My mom was in digital design. She had her own agency, small one,
Yeah.
and then left that and went back to school. She went to BMCC actually for a
nice.
year,
Did she?
became a social worker, and then was working at Elmhurst Hospital for 10 years and is recently retired and now moving into private practice.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So yeah, they move.
Wow. So retired than not, right?
Yeah, everyone's everyone you talk to my age is jealous of people who are moving towards retirement.
Right.
Imagine leaving it. I can't imagine, but good for them.
Yeah, I think retirement is often. I mean, listen, I'll know when I get there, but from what I see, it's a little bit of an illusion in the sense of fine, maybe you're not officially working, but you got to do
Right.
something.
You got to do
It's very hard for
something.
people to do nothing.
Yeah, right, right.
I just don't think it's good for you.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I am so far from thinking that way.
Yeah, which I want to get into. So,
Yeah.
okay, so you grew up down here. Your parents are clearly active. Your dad was a lawyer. I mean, certain conversations or sort of impulses, or was there an impression you got early that you feel relates to the path you're on now?
Yeah, I mean, look, so yeah, I mean, we're seeing the community develop. My family's very involved in it. And then, 9/11 happens. And, I hate to sort of, bring in such a negative, but, that sort of trauma and having the community ripped away from you,
Yeah.
like from a very young age, like I really understood what this place meant to me, how important it was, not just to me, but to our family, to our community. And I just always wanted to protect it and knew how important it was, not only here, but to the world. So it was just always something that I was deeply connected to. And I couldn't imagine it any other way.
Yeah.
You know?
Did you guys have to move out at all? Was your
Yeah. We moved to upstate New York for a year. My
Oh, you
parents
did?
kind of,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, we were in Gateway Plaza. It was kind of unlivable for a while.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, there was a time where it wasn't clear we were going to come back. And thank God my parents made that decision to come
You
back.
couldn't have
'Cause
done upstate?
I
That was
never
not-
would have been the same. No, I didn't do well up there. I didn't do well up there.
great.
Driving places didn't work for me.
Right. And then where'd you go to high school?
I went to high school at Lab in Chelsea.
Okay.
Didn't get into the specialized schools.
Did
Still
you take
still
that?
bitter
Did you
about
do
that.
The special
Oh, I did
tests and everything?
the
What do they call it?
class
Special
before.
and talented, or
Well, there's the gifted and talented
Gifted and
program, but there's the specialized high school
Yeah.
admissions test for Stuyvesant and Brooklyn
right?
Tech
My
and
sister went to
Bronx Science.
Stuyvesant.
Oh, did she?
I didn't get into there either.
Okay, good. Oh, see, we are more
We are
similar.
very similar.
Yeah, but no, I did the whole class, and then I took the test and didn't
Right.
do very well. So that's fine. I went to Lab, where my brother also went, and it was K through 12. That was a great experience. And then Cornell Law School, and right back here.
I don't know why I'm asking, but did you feel that you sort of developed or got more mature and serious later, about your life or what you wanted to do? Like, did you like school? Were you good at it? Was that your thing?
Yeah. That's a funny question. I wonder what people who know me would say about that. I feel like I was always serious and have become a little bit less serious,
Okay,
which has been a good thing.
Right.
Yeah, no, I always took school seriously. I don't think I took myself that seriously, but I took school seriously.
Yeah,
I loved learning. I loved my experience at Lab was great. I had the best teachers, really, and from elementary school through high school, I really had the best teachers and the best experience that really instilled in me like a deep desire to just keep learning and just always, treat every day as an opportunity to learn something new. I remember my high school teacher on my last day of my favorite high school teacher on my last day of school, his gift to me was just an empty notebook.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
And I
That's
still
cool.
think about that.
Yeah,
What was he
yeah.
trying to say? But I take it as a, your
Anything's
life is a
possible.
canvas,
Yeah.
Like,
That's
just
great.
create.
And what was, sort of your parents' influence, not only from their example of their work and their activism, but at home, the influences you take now? Were they strict? Were they disciplined? Was it a good balance? What were they looking for out of you?
Yeah, I never thought of them as strict, but then I hear from other people their experience growing up, and they're like, you had a bedtime?
Oh,
Like, that's pretty
really?
damn, so
Interesting.
they were pretty strict.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I think like the best example is, my dad, many attorneys, they get to that point where they can choose, okay, am I really going to go for it? There was an opportunity for him to sort of partner with some other people and really create like a bigger firm and get bigger clients and be a trial attorney. But he chose not to. He chose to kind of keep his practice really small. It was just him and one other person. And because he wanted to be home every night, for dinner.
Great.
So I mean that sort of influence I see in myself all the time. Like
That balance.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
I've made those I've had that reflection as well where I prioritize that. I think I found a good balance. You can't neglect the thing you're growing, but certainly trade-offs where I've been like, I'd rather be at home with them and either this will come around again or whatever. I don't know how you make that decision, but I think it's just an internal core. They sort of figure out those moments.
Yeah,
when
and
they
it's
happen.
hard. It's
Yeah.
hard. I mean, I think people are. I mean, it's like the basis of every Disney movie. People are really bad at knowing what they want,
Right.
you know, and everyone thinks that they want to be as successful and as wealthy
Yeah,
as they can
yeah.
be, and then yeah. I mean, again, every Disney movie.
Every Disney movie. Okay, so you end up now. You go to law school, and it's a lot of. I think your focus was was laborers and unions, or
I was at Cornell. I
yeah.
majored in industrial and labor relations.
Got it. Okay, I was at
Um,
Cornell.
yeah, law school not so
Right
much.
out of focus
Labor,
there. Yeah.
yeah. I wish there was I wish there was more of it. Labor law is extremely interesting and important, but less and less salient in this country, unfortunately, these
Right.
days.
Right.
But yeah, no, not as much of a labor focus in law school, but yeah, I mean, as you know, it's sort of a very general when you're in law school.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I noticed that. So, but the labor and union relations again, that's pretty specific. So that
Yeah.
was that an influence again that something struck you growing up, or
What I liked about that school was that it was general,
Okay.
because the curriculum is pretty awesome. There's labor law, there's labor statistics, there's labor organizing, there's organizational behavior, there's human resources. And again, like going back to what I was saying about when I was in high school, I'm always just someone who like wanted to know a little bit about a lot.
Yeah.
You know, I never really wanted to specialize. I wanted to be able to understand the different levers in our society that that influence day-to-day life for people, and it was good for that.
Yeah.
You know, didn't always meet expectations, but
Right. And then
nothing
what'd you
does.
practice when you got out of law school?
I was at a private practice. I was at a firm called Aiken Gump,
Okay.
which is, you know, large law firm. I was in the bankruptcy group that kind of got thrown into that,
All right.
where I was thrown right into the middle of the Purdue Pharma bankruptcy.
All right.
Um,
Interesting.
yeah, representing the creditors of the opioid crisis of Purdue Pharma, which
Oh.
is everyone from insurance companies to people who overdosed on their drugs to you and me who've had to pay higher health insurance premiums because
Yeah.
of them. So it was really a truly insane case to be thrown into.
Wow.
And that case is actually still going on
Is it really?
to this day. It went to the U.S. Supreme Court. After years of work, they confirmed a bankruptcy plan. The Supreme Court overturned it, and now they're kind of back to square one. So, but that's law for you.
That's nuts. And we were talking a little bit. You met your wife in law school. Does she still practice?
We met at Cornell,
You met
actually,
at Cornell.
undergrad.
Got
yeah,
it. But then
yeah.
you went to law school
We
together.
went to law school together because
Right.
we had the same GPA and the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
LSAT
yeah.
scores, and didn't plan it that
That's
way.
great.
But yeah,
And what kind of law does she practice?
she's at Sullivan and Cromwell,
Okay.
in the litigation
So she's
group.
in it.
Yeah, she's a powerhouse.
So that's like long. Is that the long hours?
Oh yeah,
That's the real deal.
yeah. We'll see if I see
Yeah.
her tonight. Yeah.
Right. Got it. Got it. Okay. So you practice, and then at some point you get the political bug. Tell me
Yeah.
about that moment.
I mean,
you know?
I always had the political bug.
Okay.
I always saw myself potentially going that direction. I
Yeah.
don't think I saw it happening this soon.
Yeah.
But I mean, look, I mean, I graduated law school at a very interesting time and
Yeah.
moved back to the city at a very interesting time. Had my first apartment in 2019, the end of the first Trump administration. We sort of lose that year. It was a very weird time to kind of be starting up your life when, you know, everyone is in their own homes.
Yeah.
And, you know, then the George Floyd protests and Biden wins, and just everything was a whirlwind. Everything was overwhelming. It was a time when there was just, we were kind of going from crisis to crisis. And I think I think a lot of people just felt really powerless, you know, felt like, you know, that the world was just kind of spinning around them and that there was nothing that they could really do about it. And then I joined my community board
Yeah. Okay.
in 2021.
This is CB1.
CB1.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're watching things on the national stage, watching things crumble, feeling helpless, and then going at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday to a community board meeting, and it's the complete opposite, right? We don't have, you know, the president to blame, the opposing party to blame anymore. We have power to do a lot of things, right? And I'm seeing just little, you know, obviously on a smaller scale, but just thing after thing be blocked, right? Like we're fighting over whether we can repurpose two parking spaces into outdoor dining, you know,
Yeah,
whether we can
yeah.
build affordable housing during a crippling housing crisis on publicly owned land. And that really got me thinking about, because at the time when I graduated law school, I was thinking about, you know, maybe I want to go into journalism or, you know, whatever it is. Because I thought at that time, you know, politics isn't necessarily the best avenue for change.
But you had a public service bent of some sort.
Yes,
You
yes.
knew, and I know what you mean, 'cause I felt the same way when I went to the DA's office and
Yeah.
when I worked at Giffords Camp. Like something in you, undefined, but
Right.
a sense to like give and serve.
And
in
you're
some
looking for the
way.
best avenue
Yes,
for it.
Yeah.
And, you know, and so I'm seeing this contrast play out on the national stage and then in my own community. And it really just got me thinking, you know, like so many people have all these theories about, you know, why things are breaking down, why are Democrats failing to win elections? And I'm just looking in front of me, I'm like, what is it that we're really selling?
Yeah.
You know, what is our vision for the future apart from just, you know, big conceptions of democracy and, you know, the independence of the judiciary and separation of powers?
Are you
But
talking about from a party perspective? So while you're
I-
on the
I
committee,
am,
but you're
right.
thinking from a party perspective, because there's something about that experience that is not, you feel is connected but not resonating.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because yeah, I mean, look, we're a blue city, we're a one-party city, we're in one of the most progressive neighborhoods in the country,
Right.
and I'm just asking myself, what are we offering people? What is our actual vision for the future? And I increasingly didn't know, and I was
Mhm.
looking around at my leaders in the city council, in you know other positions in Congress, and I'm wondering, just if someone were to ask me, what is the opposing vision for your neighborhood, not for, you know, broad conceptions of the Constitution and whatnot, but for what's going to happen on your neighborhood,
Yeah,
on
I
your
love it.
block.
Yeah.
And I didn't know. And at that moment, I was like, okay, now we need people who are actually going to lead with a vision, not with rhetoric. And that was the moment where it was like, you know, okay, it's time for me to step it up here.
That's so cool. I love that story. Because you admit you didn't know, right?
Mhm.
In the sense, which I think is great. And so you realize you have to be able to articulate, at least in your neighborhood,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
your plan is. Like,
Yeah.
don't worry about
Right.
like act where you can.
hmm
So it seems like a little bit of a gut check, right?
Yeah.
But it's
100%.
interesting that even without knowing, you're like, okay, but I'm willing to put my hat in the ring and now try to figure out and articulate that vision
Yeah.
locally, which is pretty cool inspiration. It's, you know, I think the other track could be, you know, sort of have a clear vision, but your approach, I think, might allow for a little more discovery and education
Yeah.
instead of coming in with this is the plan. You know, like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't know right now. Let's really take a look at it. I
Yeah.
don't know if that's accurate, but
No, it is accurate. And it gets to like a broader conception. I mean, I think that's how like government is supposed to be, right? Like, you know, we don't always know the answer. We try things
Right.
and see what works. I think there is this conception now for many reasons that nothing's going to work,
right.
right?
Yeah.
So that we can't do anything. And I think that has a lot of downstream effects that we could talk about into like social and cultural consequences. But yeah, we don't try things anymore. We don't dream big. We kind of just, you know, manage the situations that we have and the crises that we have with an understanding that things are declining, but we're not doing anything to turn it around. We're just kind of making sure that the next people can survive for the next couple months,
Yeah.
let alone the
Yeah.
next 5 years. So yeah, I never claim to have all the answers, but I think that it's more important. It's less important to lead with, you know, here's my 30-page policy platform, most of which is probably, you know, not feasible, and better to lead with here's what we actually want our community to look like in 50 years.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
here's the priorities that we have, and we'll figure out how to get there.
Right. Right. So, okay. So now going to that, right? You step back. What is the vision? You know, what have you learned about the vision? What are you unsure about the vision? You know, so but let's start with, you know, some of the things that you've now established for you are sort of core drivers in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
you know, your vision for it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've learned growing up in Lower Manhattan is the way that we kind of appropriate and misunderstand like what makes a good community. You hear that word all the time, community. And usually what you hear what when politicians use it, they usually are saying it to like, you know, say like I'm gonna listen to the community, right? It's usually just like this conception of like a bunch of people sitting in like a Greek council and everyone's gonna like say their interests and we're just gonna decide. But when I think back to what like made my upbringing so vibrant and in my neighborhood so beneficial and vibrant, is shared experiences, shared aspirations, shared trauma after, you know, 9/11, And then, more practical things like just the fact that there was a rent stabilization agreement in my apartment complex that allowed people to live there long enough that we could develop relationships.
Right.
It means a lot of things. It means, public spaces and shared spaces that people were able to actually interact with each other and run into each other every once in a while. I ran into you on the street before we came in here, and I was like, holy shit, have I ever run into someone on the street in Tribeca before? It never happens, right? Most people you're seeing are going to work or they're looking at their phone. We have a very bad conception in this country of what actually makes a community. And I think we have to get back to that. And I think a lot of it is practical. It's, housing that people can afford, right? Because like if you can't envision your next 3 months in your neighborhood, you're not going to invest in your neighborhood. You're not going to get involved in your community board. You're not going to, whatever it is.
Talk to me a little bit more about that. That's something I'm really interested in, especially with in the Independence Plaza proposed building that's going up. I know that's a big issue.
We're getting into it here,
in Tribeca. But from a sort of political standpoint, what I'm interested in what you said is how does affordable housing, right, benefit a community?
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the one question I ask. This could go up. It could be super high end. Housing, how does that benefit a community? How does affordable housing? Tell me a little bit about just really how it adds to the fabric of a neighborhood.
Yeah. I mean, it is community at the end of the day, right? Because the biggest decision someone makes in their life is where they're going to live. And then their biggest expense in their life is how much they're going to pay for where they live. When you just are out there talking to young people in particular who are feeling the brunt of this housing crisis the most, they don't get involved in, their relationships suffer because of it. Their connection to their community suffers because they don't know where they're going to be in a year from now.
And,
right?
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just to define the housing crisis.
Yeah.
So how do you look at it in terms of what age group of people or what demographic of people can afford to stay in the neighborhood? That's what we're looking at. And are we looking at, people who are up and coming in their professions? Like who is that housing for?
It's everybody. It's everybody. And there are different aspects of it. It's important, right? Because there are young people who are coming in who just can't afford their first apartment or are worried about where their rent's going to be in 3 months, right? That is probably the most prevalent part of the housing crisis that we hear most about, right? And that's driven by a lack of production, a shortage that has just caused rents to go out of control. But then, like you're saying, there are also people who have been here for 30 years, right, and are at risk of losing their rent stabilization, something that's happening over in Battery Park City. So there's that issue as well, right? And there's different policies we could tailor to that, more thinking about tenant protections and less about, building up the supply. So yeah, it's affecting everybody. And it is a problem, I think, that a lot of politicians caricature it one way or another to be, just about one thing. But it's really a monumental crisis that is going to take a monumental set of policies to fix it because it's very multifaceted for sure.
From a small business perspective, are there some situations where affordable housing doesn't benefit a neighborhood? Are there some situations, where some neighborhoods where it is more fitting? Is there a balance, or do the studies show? One person said to me, across the board, the studies show you get more diversity, more people spending in the neighborhood. So from a small business perspective,
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah,
what?
I mean, absolutely. People have more disposable income. They're not spending on their rent. They're going to spend it in their community. And there's no curiosity as to why, as we've seen the housing crisis get worse and worse, we're also dealing with a, storefront vacancy crisis, right?
Exactly.
Like here in Lower Manhattan, where rents are the highest they've ever been. We're also leading the city in vacant storefronts here in Lower Manhattan. So yes, the thing is that they're absolutely connected. There's no question about it.
Yeah. And there's so many theories on the storefront, and yours just may be a theory as well. But just as a little digression, do you have a sense of why that is?
Why we have vacant storefronts?
So many, other than the rents being obscenely high, but some people just say, well, listen, that's the landlord. What's the thinking behind all that?
Well, yes, the commercial rent is too high, right? And that is a problem. But there are several problems. Rents are too high, and there are things that can be done about that in terms of looking at commercial rent stabilization. There's a big problem with ghost leases in New York City, which is where, as a lot of businesses
Oh, like
take
a ghost kitchen sort of thing.
well, no, but
okay.
that's a separate problem
Sorry.
though. Ghost lease is where,
so
you know,
ignorant with that.
yeah, right. Because businesses, you know, a restaurant comes in and they want to remake the space, they get a 10-year lease, right? But
Yeah.
what if they go belly up in a year? They're still on the hook for that rent for a while.
Until they find
and,
a right.
and the landlord is not incentivized to fill that space, and
Got it.
that's a problem. And so,
Interesting.
you know, maybe a vacancy tax or something along those lines to disincentivize that sort of behavior. But also, we don't support our small businesses just, you know, in terms of just making communities more livable. And you know, outdoor dining, I think, is the best example. That was a lifeline for small businesses. That's just a huge amount of revenue right there, and sales tax, by the way, for the city, that the city council just kind of tore away by, you know, not making it year rounds, by putting in, I mean, you know this better than anyone. I'm glad you got your outdoor dining back. But yeah, I mean, there are tons of studies about how, you know, more livable streets that are less car dependent, that support pedestrians more than cars, see much higher revenues from small businesses.
Was there a period, I'm thinking like Bloomberg was really a big supporter of outdoor plazas and outdoor activity. Was there a period in the city where you think, and I don't know if that's right, but in your analysis, a period in the city where you think we were on a good trajectory towards better housing prices, better outdoor activity, better vacancy rates?
Well, it's been a long time for housing, for sure. But COVID was a really interesting time because we were seeing a lot less foot traffic just during the day. We were seeing a lot less cars coming into the city. And people start to think, like, maybe we could use our streets a little differently, you know, our public spaces a little bit differently. And outdoor dining kind of sprung up out of nowhere, and it was a mess. It had to be fixed. But yes, it sprung up out of nowhere. We saw the Open Streets program kind of spring up out of nowhere, where the city was just closing down streets and saying, hey, let's just make it for people instead of cars. That was a really interesting time, because, hey, 30% of the land area of Manhattan is streets that we devote to really just one use. And it wasn't until very recently that people started thinking, hey, maybe we should just, you know, actually support people and not always just cars. Maybe there are other things we could do. So yeah, I mean, that was a moment where I think it really switched for a lot of people. But yeah, we're unfortunately moving backwards a little bit right now. Yeah.
It's so funny. I remember during COVID, we were sitting out here, it was like late. There was music playing in Duane Park. Everybody was having a drink. I mean, people were drinking on the streets. Yeah. But it worked. Yeah. And I was like, you see, it's possible. People can self-manage. It'll be okay. You can have it. Was amazing. It was like I've never been to Italy.
It won't cause traffic.
It won't cause traffic. You know, people just, and it was amazing. Yeah. People were just happy. They weren't going crazy. You know, again, it showed like with a little more freedom, a little more trust in people, it's possible. And when I think community, I think whatever framework is going in to allow that to happen, like that's the direction. Like I'm not sure what the policy is, but I mean, in my particular view, it's the lightest touch needed to allow people to self-govern. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
to hang out.
Yes.
To hang out. I mean, again, we were talking about community and how we have a very bad conception of what it is and don't really know what it is. But yeah, just like those interactions, those spaces where people, and oftentimes, not just spaces where people can, you know, sit in a plaza and eat sweet green, you know, which is oftentimes what we think of when we think of public space in the city. Is like, how can we just make more plazas just for people who are working and have just public seating available? But areas that are actually places that people want to hang out
and gather.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Gather, walk through slowly, maybe. Maybe if you're walking your dog, you choose a different route because you want to walk this way. Like, that's the way you actually start to build a community where people interact. They start seeing the same faces over and over again. That's how you do it. And like you said, it is very, very subtle, but it's also really practical in the ways that we can create it. But we never talk about it that way. We never talk about that way.
We don't. And it's so interesting you're bringing this up. What I'm hearing is there's something in the way, it's communication. It's the way people communicate, right? During COVID, a great WhatsApp group popped up amongst restaurants. I think it's called the Restaurant Group, whatever. I forgot who started. It was actually a real estate guy who started it. Traditionally in New York City, there's tons of competition. Nobody, I didn't tell you my guy. I didn't give you my handyman. I didn't tell you, you know, we didn't talk, right? I wasn't so much, but the real restaurants in the hospitality community, it was sort of very cutthroat, right? Because you're fighting for survival, and
Right.
but COVID broke that down, and this
Yeah.
amazing group started. It still exists today, and I use it all the time. Anybody had a lawyer for this? Anybody understand this regulation? I got this to sell. It's amazing.
Wow, that's really interesting.
But I feel like there's a connection because it's how do you get a community communicating
Mm-hmm.
just over just like simple things even. There's policy, but also, hey, I'm selling a freezer. Any restaurant in the neighborhood need a freezer,
Right.
whatever.
Yeah. And
A
it's,
sort of small town interaction,
and it's interesting how I said earlier, what creates a community, shared trauma and
Yeah.
like going through COVID, it did bring people together.
Yeah.
And we had that shared experience of how are we going to get out of it. And now for the rest of our lives, people, who lived in this community were here during that time. We're always going to say, remember, when there were all those storefronts that were, beat in and had to put, plaster in front of it. Remember that time when
Yeah,
everyone was in the Hamptons and
Yeah.
everyone left and there was no one here but the kids,
Right.
like that's again, like something that I find so interesting being on the community board, and just in our general politics in the city is how often we talk about historical preservation and preserving past experiences. And that's important, right?
Yeah,
That is
yeah.
important. But there's so little about talking about how we're going to create new experiences for people, right?
That's a great
like,
call, yeah.
yeah, like what is the next generation going to remember about their time in Tribeca, right? Because we're all going to remember when they were, warehouses for eggs and whatnot, and we're going to we're going to preserve the beautiful facades. But what's the next generation? What is going to be their shared experiences? And very seldom do we talk about that and think about
That's a great
that.
call. That's a great point. So another question that's coming up is, okay, you're on the community board, you're going into politics. I'm sure there's connection between national politics and local politics.
Yeah.
But I think also something what you're saying is you can do local politics and maybe not get caught up in the national vibe that can taint trying to get things done.
Oh yeah.
So my question is, and if I look for somebody who's running for office, like I would love somebody running for president to be like, guys, listen. Both people are telling you their plans, but this is what's going to happen. I'm going to step into the Oval Office on the first day. Somebody's going to hand me a security briefing, and everything I spoke about is now irrelevant. You know what I mean? Like I'm going to step. That's just the way it works.
Yeah.
I have ideas,
Yeah.
but then world changes like that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to step in that office. So what I would want is somebody who can adapt,
Yep.
understand their core principles enough, but then also, and this is my question to you, I guess it's how do you bridge the divide, right?
Yeah.
What is your approach to having a conversation that takes us out of the animosity and to the solution?
Yeah. It's being practical, and it's funny because I am an ideological person. Like that's just the reality of it. But most of what I'm talking about when I'm out there is not ideological because I choose to be laser focused on your neighborhood and your block.
Yeah.
And the reality is that these issues aren't ideological. As much as people want to make them ideological, they're not.
Give me an example.
Yeah. So outdoor dining.
Yeah.
Outdoor dining. It gets moralized to to the end of time.
Some people just
right?
hate it.
Some
right?
people hate it,
Yeah.
and we get New York Post articles about it, and it becomes politicized, and it's talking about how it's gonna hurt working class people, like out of nowhere. These
Right.
things that we know aren't true, and it gets moralized and moralized. And at the end of the day, it's like, guys, we're just talking about whether or not we're going to turn 2 parking spaces into a place for people to enjoy a meal at a restaurant they love in their
Right.
community.
Right.
Like, that's it, right? So, and this is something.
But then they say, okay, but the slippery slope is now you're privatizing. So I mean, it becomes like I don't know what the word is. It becomes polarizing.
Yeah,
right?
it does.
Yeah,
It does.
yeah.
It does. And look, it's been hard for me
Yeah.
because I've been like enmeshed in national politics for a long time. I've been writing about it. I had my own podcast for a while. So I'm used to living in those spaces, but especially after the last election where I think everyone kind of learns like people aren't that ideological most of the time, like the people you hear from are,
Yeah.
but most people are pretty practical
yeah.
and they want things to just work.
Right.
And so I choose every day to just be laser focused on how are we going to make things work because the reality is the ideological goals that we have and,
Yeah.
and the broader, more abstract goals that we have are not going to come to fruition if things aren't working. Because
Right.
at the end of the day, that's the point of all of this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Is to make things work. So that's how I talk about it. That's how I think about it. It's not going to make everyone happy. There
Right.
are always going to be the people who want to make it ideological.
But how do you show that it's not odd? I mean, for instance, you set out for a vision for the city, right?
Yeah.
How do you show something like outdoor dining or affordable housing? And we'll talk about some of the other core issues that are important to you. How do you show that those can go beyond ideology and are good for everyone?
Yeah. And this is
stats, statistics. I mean, how is?
Yeah, I like to think it is, but it's not. I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
bring
It's
up
emotional, right?
data. It is emotional.
Yeah.
It is emotional. Yeah, and again, that's also something that you learn when you're running for office is that things hit people in a certain way,
Yeah.
and because it's of their own experiences with things, and one person's experience with outdoor dining here on Duane Street is different from how people have experienced it over on Canal Street.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it's about demonstrating that it works, right? People have to see it to believe it, and that's fair, but that's a big challenge for me as someone who's not in power right now, right?
Yeah.
I have minimal influence that I have on the community board, but I can't demonstrate to people certain things because we haven't tried it yet. But all I can do is show them examples and pitch them on a vision.
Yeah.
And that's what elections are about, right?
Yeah.
We're going to pitch separate messages, and one of them's going to win. People are going to decide.
How long has the campaign for not community board, city council been? That's for how long you've been campaigning?
Yeah.
I know you opened the headquarters recently, but it started before that.
Yeah, I mean, I officially announced, I think, in December, but I had been, raising money and kind of, campaigning behind the scenes. Now, it wasn't really behind the scenes; it was pretty public, but for about a year,
Okay.
almost a year.
So I want to ask you one thing, but then I want to talk to you about, which I found really interesting, this sort of abundance philosophy that's going around. So I want to get to that. But let me ask you this one quick thing, which is sort of, you've been campaigning for a year, talking to people. What have you learned? We touched on it a little bit, but what have you learned in that year of either about people or about communicating or something you've had to sort of relearn or check in yourself and change?
Yeah. You're probably the same way because you're a lawyer. I want to be so prepared for everything.
Right.
And I was going into every forum, everything, super prepared, right? Not just on the policy, which you've been preparing for that like my whole life, just following everything so closely, but just like every word I was going to say, I wanted to be so prepared and just have every answer down pat. And it came off fine, but I was starting to watch videos of myself and I was like, damn, like I'm boring myself,
Right. They're not really seeing you.
Yeah, right. And the most important thing I think in a leader is just being normal and being authentic. And people say that all the time, but it is so true because, again, like you're talking about, people understand that once you get into the role, politics leadership is not robotic. Things are going to change. You have to adapt.
Right.
And people aren't looking for someone they're going to agree with 100% of the time because they don't exist.
Yeah, exactly.
They're looking for someone that they trust.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, more recently, I've just been, being myself a little bit more.
I love it.
Just talking, like we are right now.
Yeah. And do you find you're enjoying the process the more you do that? Yeah,
absolutely.
I bet.
And it's working better.
That's
I think.
cool.
I think the response is better. It definitely. It's really important. I think every person in public life probably goes through that.
Yeah. I think everybody everywhere. I mean, I talk to entrepreneurs, all sorts of people. They gotta find that voice.
Yeah.
That's authentically theirs, and then good, bad, or indifferent, things just seem to be better, at least in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard because you want to be prepared, and everyone tells you have to be prepared. But at a certain point, you have to trust yourself, and you have to be yourself. But it's
the preparation. I think. Listen, you're dealing with topics and issues, and you have to be prepared. But then you got to be in the moment.
You got to be in the moment.
Drop the preparation, which will be there when the answer comes.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Life is preparation.
For life, absolutely. I had ages ago when I was younger, we had a radio show because a friend was a radio personality, and he gave and he let the station sort of give us an hour of like radio. So we were trying to do like
How old were you?
I don't. That's a good question. I'm going to say
Ballpark.
17, 18,
Okay.
something like
Yeah.
that. You
Great.
know,
Yeah,
it was
that's
supposed to be like a young kids hour
Mm-hmm.
issue thing. The lesson was the best shows were when you were fully prepared and then you let it go.
Yeah.
And we tried everything. We tried,
Yeah.
let's not prepare at all to try to be in the moment. No, I think to be confident in the moment, you have to be prepared
Mm-hmm.
and then you let it go. So interesting lesson. But okay, we spoke a little while ago when I met you before about there's a shift now. And I don't know if this is a shift just in sort of Democratic Party thinking or something larger, but it was from deficit mindset to scarcity mindset to abundance mindset, which I think is an amazing view in life in general. But talk to me a little about what that means in your context.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's been encouraging to see because, again, there's ideology and then there's just we want to get things right and there's practicality. And this scarcity mindset means a lot of things, and it was built up over a very long period of time, in many cases for a very good reason, right? So things like environmental review laws that came out of the experience of, Robert Moses, like ruling with an iron fist and tearing apart communities, and we wanted to prevent that.
Right.
So we put in place environmental review laws that just, made the government go through the process before they could do anything to make sure they weren't going to harm the environment, weren't going to harm their communities. We had zoning laws, which the first zoning laws came out of, we had manufacturing zones and people were breathing in, toxic fumes. So we wanted to make sure we weren't building homes right next to it.
Right.
And, we had zoning laws that came for more nefarious reasons that were just, white communities wanting to, keep the quote unquote character of their community and keep people out of their community. So they built up this regime of rules to prevent growth in their community and change in their community. So we had all those things that some were for good reason, some were for very bad reason. And we got to experiencing them for the past 50 years. And what we have seen is that, yes, in some instances, it has been good in terms of, preventing the worst abuses of, Robert Moses types and tearing apart communities. But really what it has created is a system of anti-growth, right? Of preventing any sort of growth and allowing people that don't necessarily have the best intentions to utilize these rules against what we want.
Okay.
Preventing housing, preventing new public transit projects, preventing clean energy projects. And so the Democratic Party, I think, has just, looked at the situation, looked at our housing crisis, looked at our clean energy crisis and said, we need to grow. We need to grow. And the bottleneck that is preventing us from growing are these rules that have created this scarcity mindset. So let's get rid of them. Let's free up the capacity of our government to do what we want it to do. And that really at its core is what it's about, what abundance is about, I think. It means a lot of things specifically when you get into different areas, but that's really what it's about, is creating that capacity to actually grow into the future.
Yeah. Letting industry work it out a bit in some way.
Letting industry work,
Yeah.
but also letting government work.
And
I think that's the most important part, right?
Yeah, absolutely. With less red tape and less, what's interesting, it sounds like in a way a little more trust in the people and the process. So if there's less red tape, people can get things done a little more.
Yeah.
And that's very interesting. And so that is what is that? Is that a national movement? Is that something that happens in the party, or where is that sound coming from?
It has very much been a national movement. You heard Kamala Harris talking about it during the presidential campaign, Joe Biden talking about it, AOC, Elizabeth Warren. I mean,
Right.
it's cross-ideological. It's broad. It applies, in San Francisco. It applies here in New York City. It applies everywhere. And so, it has been a nationwide movement that I think, in New York City, I think we are a kind of a shining example of this trend, but also how we can get out of it.
Yeah.
Because one of the craziest things, one of the craziest stats that I've learned about about New York City is that the median New Yorker actually lives in a less dense neighborhood than they did in 1970.
Really?
That we have actually lost density on a median basis, obviously not average because
Right.
we've grown population wise, but we have most of the growth that we've seen in New York City has been in the outer boroughs into places where we're have more of a suburban lifestyle.
Right.
And the places that are most dense, like the East Village, for example, have actually lost density.
Well, there was a huge migration out of the city over the past 5 to 10
Yeah,
years,
yeah, and
right?
then yes, and then more recently, yes, we've seen an outflow as well. But yeah, over a 50-year period, we have actually not grown. We've actually shrunk,
Right.
which is in terms of density, which is just crazy. And it makes you think, what are the consequences of that, right? And it's just like brass tacks, supply and demand. If we're not growing while our population is growing and while demand is growing, it's going to become unaffordable for people, right? Only the wealthiest are going to be able to afford it. Only the people with the most resources are going to be able to get things that are scarce.
But explain that a little bit, because if there's less density and real estate prices are still going up, how is that working? Meaning, aren't you trying to attract people back in? It feels like the prices would go down if that was the case.
Well, I mean, you're talking about the outflow of people and how that affects people.
As far as affordable housing in the city and things like that.
Yeah,
right?
that is a more recent kind of very specific issue that we have had an outflow of people.
Okay.
But we also saw a big inflow of people with a lot of migrants were coming here for a while.
Yeah.
Now that's going down, and now other people who had left are starting to come back. We're starting to see an influx of people from southern states where there was a big outflow of people. So those kind of population trends change all the time. But there's no question that demand for people who want apartments in New York City over several decades is going up, right? People still want to live here.
Right.
And people want to live in cities. As much as people say that cities, are dirty and no one wants to live there, people want to live in cities.
Yeah.
And they want to live in Lower Manhattan in particular.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, and we're not, and we have, and the stock of available supply for places for people to live has not grown commensurate with that.
Yeah, interesting.
So
okay,
it's pretty.
How many people do you have on your team or on your campaign team? And are these volunteers? How does that work?
We do have a big volunteer operation. I've been very, very kind of humbled and encouraged by that, about how many young people in particular have kind of just like come off the sidelines and gotten involved and are standing there on the street with me. But for a guy they'd never met before.
And where is that coming from? Is that your message is getting out? I mean, how is that?
Yeah,
Okay.
It's coming from I think people being pissed off about what they're seeing in their community, and a sense out there that people need to get involved in their community. If they're people always say to me, I feel like I can't complain if I'm not getting involved.
Yeah,
I'm like, that's great.
And just for clarification, CB1 covers Tribeca, Chinatown.
So you're talking about the council district?
Yeah.
So there's the community board district.
CB1. You're right. The
council district is roughly everything south of Houston Street. So it's a lot.
I thought it had like a weird thing like up the east side or something. Didn't it do like
it cuts a little bit down around Ridge Street, down to I think Delancey, and then on the west side it cuts around Spring. But yeah, roughly. I mean, it's got Soho, Tribeca, Battery Park, Chinatown, Lower East Side, Little Italy, Nolita. I mean that's
such a crazy diverse.
It is.
Area.
It's a pretty incredible district. Yeah.
Do you find the issues that you're talking about are universally affecting those in the same way?
In
or
some
there's
sense.
Some where that neighborhood's like, I don't really care about that issue.
Yeah. So one thing we've been doing is we've been doing house parties, which my wife is running this process beautifully.
Nice.
And we've been all over the district having house parties, and we have people sign in and write down their top issue. Almost everyone says housing. Almost everyone says housing. Now, how we get affordable housing in a place like Chinatown is different than how we're going to get affordable housing in Battery Park. Is different from how we're going to have it in the financial district. But yes, I think that we are dealing with very shared crises in terms of housing, in terms of the kind of degradation of our public spaces, the public safety issues that we're facing are common to everyone. And again, when we talk about how we're rebuilding a coalition to go up against the horrors that we're seeing in the federal government, these are the things that we have to focus on, the sort of shared crises that we're facing, because that's what brings people together, is what are the problems that we're all facing together and how we're going to solve them. It's going to benefit all of us.
I mean, it seems like there's only so many things you could tackle, right? And I mean, there's only so much time, so many things you could tackle.
I'm optimistic.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I guess practically speaking, I mean, it sounds like I love your vision for greater communication, greater shared experiences, and thinking about how we're just physically going to enjoy the space we're in the future. And then it also seems like I would say the housing is probably one of the top issues, if
Yeah.
not the top issue.
Yeah.
What is the connection between your work at the community level and the national level? Like, what stops you from getting that done locally from the national influence?
Yeah, I have to say, not a lot.
Okay, well, that's a
Yeah,
great answer.
yeah.
I mean, that's what I was hoping.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not a lot. And
But do you find though that, and I think you said something great, which is, I think one of the reasons when you first got into it, I think people get all wrapped up in one, but we can get something done right here and now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
anyway, talk more about that.
yeah, and this gets to what we were talking about before, how people just don't believe anything's going to work anymore.
Right.
And they don't believe things are possible. We built the Empire State Building. It was when they
Was that like 6 months? What did it take?
broke ground to it being open to people going into
How
the
long did
building
it
in
take?
13 months.
Yeah. I mean, that's
Like,
nuts.
it's
That's
nuts. And then
Yeah.
there was a time we were building 40 new train stations every
Yeah.
year. I think we built 2 in my life. I mean, I talk all the time about doing phase 4 of the Second Avenue subway. Let's bring the Second Avenue subway all the way down into Chinatown, which I
Right.
think would be amazing. And people look at me like I have 3 heads,
Yeah.
and it's a real problem, because the reality is we actually can do these things,
Yeah.
but we just have put up so many bottlenecks, so many roadblocks, and we don't have the leaders willing or capable to take those risks. And it really has bred this sort of cynicism and just complete distrust, not only of our government, but of just people in their social relationships and their everyday lives. I really think it all comes down to the fact that there's just this sense that things are completely broken and are not going to get better.
Yeah.
And that is just a really bad place for a society to be. And that's how you end up, I think, with leaders that we have, because people just give up. They give up.
Yeah, I mean, the sad thing is there's also the evidence to support that. You can understand why they feel that way. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, but I think that is a strong. If I heard somebody run as a candidate and said, "Listen, we're clearly involved, we're activists, and so we think about national and local, right?
Yeah.
But I'm running
Yeah.
for here,
Yeah.
right? Let's not let that. And this is how we're going to get it done. Like I don't know that. If I'm really asking you, is like, I don't. If you tell me, no, I don't really need much from the government, whether I like it or not, to get done.
Yeah.
Whether I support what's going on, then great. Let's just focus. I think it's a powerful message.
Yeah, and I mean, and look, like, let's be realistic. Like, yes, the federal government is coming for New York City. They're trying to cut our federal funding for public transit. They're trying to get rid of things like congestion pricing. Yes, of course, there are things that they are trying to interfere with, and problems that we will have. But we have no one to blame for ourselves, but ourselves, for the fact that right now, in Council District 1, there is a project to put up 100% affordable housing for seniors, 123 units, 100% affordable on city-owned land, and it's taken 10 years to even get started on it.
Right.
Like, we have no one to blame for that
exactly.
but ourselves.
Exactly.
And there's so much of that. And one of the things I try to do when I'm out there and just in my everyday life and talking to people who have given up and don't believe that things are possible, is just talk about the things that we already do that are pretty incredible. I mean, like the fact that the New York City government is feeding hundreds of thousands of kids breakfast and lunch every single day, right? Without a hitch.
Yeah.
The fact that it can snow in New York City 6 inches, you could go to bed at 1 a.m, wake up, and it's just all gone.
Yeah.
There's a ticker tape parade happens on Broadway after the Liberty won the championship, and all the ticker tape is just gone within 45 minutes. Like, our government does accomplish Herculean tasks every single day, and we could do so much more of it if we just got out of our own way.
Yeah.
And you look like Pennsylvania, when the I-95 collapsed, and they said it was going to take 20 months just to get through the bidding process, and they had Governor Shapiro had an emergency declaration, said no, they got it done in like 12 days.
Right.
We have the capacity to do these things, we choose not to.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it seems like you need again, it comes back to communication. You have to find that. One of my favorite quotes is Rumi. It says, out beyond the idea of right doing and wrong doing, there's a field.
Mm-hmm.
I'll meet you there.
Yeah.
That's the spot we got to operate from.
Yeah. That's terrifying.
And I think and I think it takes a communicator. I think it takes a leader. I think there's a certain level of that's what you would call a statesperson.
Yeah.
Right? Who says, yeah, we all have these competing agendas, but here are the universal things we can agree. We want this scene to be clean.
Mm-hmm.
We want it to be economically robust.
Yep.
You want to be safe. I mean, nobody can argue about these things.
Right.
Where the particular fear comes in, where is such an interesting, and I'm not on the front lines like you, but to me, that would be the question. Like, how do I see where the fear comes in to block what we all really want?
Yeah.
And then answer that. You know?
Yeah. I mean, again, I really believe, and you could go back to Plato was writing about this. I mean, this is what happens when society gets messy and society fails to address people's everyday needs. Right? Like, I really think like the extent of the crises that we're facing on housing is at the core of so much of this distrust and cynicism that we're talking about, and the fear. Because people, again, have lost faith, they've lost trust, and they much rather, hand power to a strong man who promises they're going to clean it up than to, practical people who said, hey, we got to have more open streets and pedestrian plazas to support our small businesses, because they don't believe those things are going to work anymore. Yeah. Because they're seeing it with their own two eyes. Like you're saying before, I mean, what do you expect is going to happen? We actually have the experience of seeing things not work. Yeah. So what do you expect is going to happen? So I really think it's back to just brass taxes. Let's show people things can work.
Yeah. I love it. That's, so, you have debates, you got to get endorsements, generally the election is won on a small margin, right?
Yeah. Well, this is a whole other topic here of, I mean, well, let's last election, two years ago in 2023, there was 7% turnout citywide.
Wow.
Okay. For every council seat was up. We were a little better here in District 1. I think we had 15% turnout. But the incumbent won with 60% of the vote. Yeah. So, do the math. That's what, 7-8% of people in this district of registered Democrats voted. I mean, so, we will have higher turnout in this election because of the mayoral and whatnot. But but still, people don't participate. They don't. And it's a real problem again that, if people aren't showing up to the polls and voting, who are our leaders going to be accountable to? Yeah. It's that simple. I mean, democracy can't work if it's just a subset of people who are showing up to the polls every time. And it's, and I hate to scold people, but, I oftentimes have to scold people my age who are the ones, and I don't blame them. Again, they've given up, but you have to show up. You have to vote. You can't complain if you're not making your voice heard. And people think, one vote's not going to make a difference and whatnot. It actually,
in your race, it does.
It really could.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the experience I've had, it's very close. It definitely can make the difference.
But again, like we were talking about creating community. If the people aren't sure if they're going to be living here 6 months from now, they're going to be less likely to vote because they're just like, this might not affect me. And if you look at the numbers, people who show up to vote, people who participate on community boards, they're older, they tend to be whiter, they're wealthier, and they're more likely to own their home. And it totally makes sense. They're more invested in their community.
They have the time, right?
They have the time.
They have the
time. Although, I don't take that excuse because it doesn't take much time to vote, people.
No, the voting, I don't mean, but I mean to sit on the community board.
Sure, absolutely.
It's
a slog. Yeah. It's a slog and a half. But yeah, I mean, this is who our government is accountable to. Yeah. And it's simple at the end of the day that these are the voices they are listening to. These are the voices that control whether they keep their job or not. And if you want your voice to be heard and you want your interests to be addressed, they have to be accountable to you. Yeah. And they're not if you're consistently not showing up to vote.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking about new ways you campaign. I mean, part of it is how do you get people jazzed to go out there? I don't know. And, Obama broke the mold with, technology and texting and all this. You employ any of that? Social media, TikTok, is there a new method?
I will give
coming on podcast.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, that's part of it, right? I mean, this is a problem particularly on the left, where there is so much focus on this sort of older, outdated model of, direct voter contact, of, knocking on people's doors, being out there in the streets. That stuff is really important, and
Yeah.
it is the best way to sort of persuade people and motivate them to vote. But I'll tell you, you should come stand out there with me on the street when
Yeah.
people are on their way to work in Lower Manhattan. No one exists in physical spaces anymore.
No.
They are on their phone.
Yeah, yeah.
They've got their AirPods on. They are on the move.
Absolutely.
People exist
Right.
on TikTok, on Instagram, on Twitter, and they get scolded for it all the time. But that's the reality.
Right.
And you have to meet people where they are. And look at the presidential campaign. I mean, Kamala Harris, they were touting how many doors they knocked on, millions
Right.
and millions and millions of doors. The Trump campaign had almost no field operation but they were everywhere on the
Yeah.
internet, and that's where people are. And it doesn't mean doesn't mean that you're not, meeting people in physical spaces. But we need to meet people where they are.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've made a very concerted effort to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll change gears a little bit.
Yeah.
So I guess a little more reflective. How do you handle it? Are there practices you do? How does how and your wife, as far as dealing with the time and just tell me a little bit about
Yeah.
the behind the scenes,
I could probably use more practices. I'm kind of just in the whirlwind. No, I mean, I have the best support
Yeah.
I could ask for. With my wife, who's just encouraged me, ever since I met her, and is just, right there in the trenches with me.
Did you talk to her about this decision?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And was there a back and forth, or was it pretty much support from the beginning, or even your decision? Were you like, once you got the impulse, was it clear, or were you sort of like,
I think
maybe not?
I think she had a sense from the moment she met me that this might
Got it,
happen.
okay, got it.
But no, it's only been support.
Right.
And I mean, that's the most important thing. I mean, when you have support at home and from your family and then you can pretty much withstand anything. So yeah, I mean, I feel like this has only been a positive experience for me. Like it's been one of the most fulfilling things that I've ever done. And it's not to say it isn't hard a lot of time and overwhelming a lot of time. There have been times where I'm like, I'm not sure I can do this. I'm not sure I'll be able to. I've never raised
I'm
money
sure.
before. And there are times where it's just like, God, I wish that, I was able to do the things with my wife that we used to do more often.
Right.
But it just feels like such a privilege to just, in even the smallest way, just be part of the story of this
Yeah.
community that I am so obsessed with, probably to a fault. And yeah, it's made possible by having people around me who actually value it and see some potential in me. And
Yeah.
so I feel like nothing can really go wrong in this.
That's great.
And I'm blessed to feel that way.
Well, I was going to ask you, however this goes, what at this point are there certain, I don't know, life lessons you've learned that are going to apply to whatever happens next, that you've learned about yourself or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Like it's that it's going to be okay.
It's probably the biggest one. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's so daunting when you first you sit down with your team and you look at the plan and this is how much money you have to raise and you're going to have to be in XYZ neighborhoods and all these forums. But if you just if you can find a way to not let it crush you, and just take it day by day, like you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Like you're going to be okay if you just believe that you could do it, have the confidence to step into those rooms and get on the phone and ask people for money. And you other people will surprise you.
Yeah.
Other people will surprise you. You think that everyone's going to hate you and you're
Right,
going to get
right.
attacked all the time, and it does happen, but most of the time it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
you got to believe in what you're saying. You got to believe in
You
yourself,
have to
right? People are
definitely
going to
believe in what
respond
you're
to
saying
that. Yeah.
and believe in yourself. Obviously,
Yeah.
I've never had a problem with believing in what I'm saying. Right? Like that's why I'm doing this, because I believe in the vision so much. It's the part about believing that you can do it and that you're the right messenger for
Yeah,
it that is a
that's fair
really
enough.
difficult time to get over. A really difficult thing to get
And
over.
you
but-
feel like you're getting better with that?
Yeah, definitely. And it also is, helped, talking to other people who've been through this process who just say like that imposter syndrome, like you have to shake that off
Yeah.
immediately. Because every single person who's in government from city council up to the White House has felt that same way. Has
Yeah.
felt, I am not equipped for this. You have to be better than I am to win at this, but
Right.
it's not true. Believe in what you can accomplish.
Yeah, no, it's a great lesson. I forgot where I heard the story, but the story is basically this guy, I don't know if he was in war, walking through the jungle, and he's like, why me, why me, why me? And then he had this moment where he said, well, why not me?
Yeah.
And I think that's,
Yeah.
you have that impulse, you have that desire to serve, applaud anybody who's willing to step into the ring and give of themselves to their community, right? It's public service.
Yep.
That's what it is. It's a service. And why not you? I mean, the impulse came to you,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so I think owning that is powerful, and I think people probably respond to that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Which actually makes me get back to the thing we were talking about, the marketing, if you will, or getting the word out. I think on the social media side, I think people, and this gets back to the idea of sort of the trust and we can get things done. People want to see somebody like them. They
Mhm.
want to see just a
Right.
human person.
Yep.
And that's why I think a lot of even these sort of like silly or funny things resonate, because they just want to see somebody sort of
Mhm.
breaking out of the mold and not reading from.
Right.
And I think that's where that secret sauce is into getting people to just trust.
Yeah,
I think that's why that resonates with the younger generation.
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, like we were saying before, like people don't expect someone that's going to agree with them 100% of the time
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it doesn't exist. It's just unrealistic. It's not how people think. And we have politicians right now who think that they have to hire a consultant to get every issue right.
Yeah.
It's like we have to be on the winning side of every single issue. How does this poll? But that's not what it is. It's that you have to be someone that people trust to take them into uncharted waters.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
That's
Right?
it.
Because that's where everyone knows we are headed. We are headed into we're in a dark place, and hopefully, we can get out of it, and there's going to be crises along the way, and we're going to have to try different things. They want someone they can trust.
Yeah.
And it's really, it makes it so much more simple at
Yeah.
that point,
Yeah. No, it's great. Well, this has been amazing. I mean, I think what resonates with me and what you said is the hyper focus on local, which is the office you're running for. It's
Yeah.
a local office, a super important one. Things can get done locally.
Yeah.
They don't have to be caught up in the national conversation.
Yeah.
The positivity, and whatever that magic sauce is to gain a community, to communicate, to share, have these shared experiences, I think are really great messages that people can get behind.
Yeah.
So, kudos to you. I wish you, the best of luck.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
It's been great digging in a little bit.
Yeah. And my journey always goes through laughing, man.
I appreciate it.
Every
I appreciate
every
it.
meeting I take, I'm always like, let's do laughing, man.
I love it. Yeah, it's interesting. Grew up in this neighborhood like you, so it's funny we share that. Small business owner in the neighborhood. It's interesting to have that perspective, and so
Yeah.
digging in with you has been really, really eye opening. So I appreciate your time.
Of course.
Thanks, Jess. Great,
Hope-
man.
Hope to do it again.
Yeah, thank you.